My name is Roy Vance. We're at ERDCC. I've been in prison for 23 years and have 2 lives without and a life with. I'm the brains behind it. It was my idea and my suggestions and that kind of stuff. I first met him about a year before this. We were actually in the same county jail, but we were in the small 4 at the time. And I was in there with him for 2 weeks before I got released to go to a rehab center. The second time I met up with him was in the same county jail, except that we were in what they called the Big Six. And I'm not sure what he was in there for, but it was misdemeanors, I think. Michael Tisius was 17 or 18, I think, maybe 19 at the most. Michael Tisius was more of a follower, and he looked up to me, I feel like a big brother, and I basically let him down by asking him to do what he did. But he was young and easily manipulated and whatnot, and I took advantage of that, honestly. He had kind of a kid mentality. I mean, he would want to, there was a guy in there that he didn't like, but he didn't want to say it to him. He would say it to me when we were talking privately and that kind of stuff. He's not one for confrontation at all. He was into cartoons and that kind of stuff. He was more, he acted younger than he actually was. He was pretty much on his own, it seemed like. Nobody ever came up and helped him or brought him anything or anything like that. It's hard to explain, except that I seen a kid in a grown man's body, and I knew that I could manipulate him into doing what I wanted him to do.
I'm Tracy Bullington. We are at Chillicothe Correctional Center, and I have been locked up for 23 years, serving 2 life sentences. I know Michael from Roy Vance. Roy Vance was my boyfriend who I was dating. I was coming out of a very abusive, mental and physical abusive relationship when I met Roy Vance. Definitely, he changed his persona to be what I needed at the time. He made me feel extremely special, and he was so sweet and so kind and so caring. Just in the way that he interacted with me, just in how he treated me and how I was always special. I mean, he opened doors for me. None of the others did that. At the very beginning, it was a nurtured relationship because he had to nurture the feelings that I was developing for him, because I was so unsure of men at that point that he had to nurture and promote or prod or coax the feelings that I developed for him. Looking back on it now, absolutely, it was intentional. He was great with my kids. He treated my kids like they were one of his, like they were his. And that meant the world to me. My ex-husband wasn't in my oldest 2 kids' lives. My youngest son's dad was in and out. So even the way he treated my kids was special for me. He used my kids to get what he needed out of me. He needed that connection because he needed someone that was willing to do what he asked them to do. Kind of like Mike worshiped the ground that he walked on because of the way he treated me and treated my kids. Because he got in my head and he became what I needed. He became the perfect, in my head at the time, the perfect person, the perfect man in my life that me and my kids needed.
Tracy Bullington is my ex-girlfriend. She was my girlfriend at the time. Our relationship was toxic, basically. I mean, it's the only way to put it. I didn't have a license, and she took me around to do my meth cooks and that kind of stuff. She was very attached. I do think I could influence her the way I did Mike.
I first learned Mike's name when Roy started sending me these really great drawings, artwork, and I was curious as to who was doing them for him because I was pretty sure Roy couldn't draw like that. So I asked, and that was the first time that I heard Mike's name. Roy told me about Michael is that he was from an abusive family and that he needed a father figure in his life. In my opinion, he became what Michael needed, just like he became what I needed. He got Michael to open up about his background and what had went on in his life, and Roy became that. The same thing he did to me. He just said that he was like a child, that he was more like a little kid than a 19-year-old.
When they told Mike that he was getting out, I actually gave him her phone number so that he could get in touch. And if he could find a ride or whatever, and he did, eventually he found a ride to Columbia, and she went and picked him up and gave him a place to stay and made sure he had food and stuff like that.
When I met Michael, he was a skinny guy, about my height, which is 5'6", short dark hair. He looked like someone that was not in their late adolescence, like maybe he was around 16, 17 was his looks, in my opinion. For his intellect, I definitely would have put him more around a 15, 16-year-old. Roy, he became a mess when he knew Mike was getting out. He started demanding that I go to St. Louis and get him. My car wasn't in good enough shape to go that distance. And I told Roy that. And he just started demanding that I get there anyway. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from Michael telling me that he has a way to get to Columbia if I could pick him up in Columbia. I was to never let Michael out of my sight. To be honest with you, I honestly feel like Roy had his doubts that Mike would follow through with what they had planned when they were together in county jail.
Mike was the most acceptable to the plan for sure. The other two people that were involved actually backed out. One of them ended up testifying at my trial. I don't know if he testified at Mike's or not. Well, the plan was to bring a gun into the jail and take the jailers and have them get the keys and then bring them back there and lock them in the big six. To have Mike bring the gun back up there and put the jailers in the holding cell. That was my fault. I'm the one that coaxed him into doing that. So I'm responsible for the planning. I'm the one that came up with that started the conversation. And it actually started over 2 bars that were sold out with a pancake spatch up from the year before. There was 2 guys in there from Georgia that had actually escaped out of there, and they had got a pancake spatula from the trustee, cut notches in it so it was like a saw, and they sawed through 2 of the bars and escaped out of that. And that's what brought the conversation to begin with, and then I took off from there. Yeah, there's no way he would have came up with that. That was strictly my idea. I'm the one that coaxed him into doing it. It was nothing he would have come up with. I'm the brains, I guess, or lack of a better way to put it.
He was excited. He couldn't wait to see Roy, just kept talking about Roy, was telling me all about what him and Roy talked about in jail on what was going to happen. Kind of like a kid getting ready to go see his dad for the first time. Everything was about Roy for Mike. He was just really anxious, and God, he just idolized Roy. I don't know to the extent that of their conversations, but Roy got in there so deep that this kid idolized him. and pretty much basically worshiped the ground that Roy walked on. It was all about Roy and how he couldn't wait to see him, how he wanted to make him proud of him. Leading up to it on the drive there, he was very stoic, very just like in a trance-like state in the car. And his hands were, I don't know how to describe it, the placement of his hands, kind of like together in a pray-like thing, but he was just very quiet and very stoic. During the incident, when we were inside, he was very polite to the officers. He was thanking the one for everything that the officer had done for him while he was incarcerated in the county jail, and very respectful to him. When we got back to the car, Mike was like frantic, just waving his hands around in the car, waving the gun around. Oh my God, what did I do? Like he couldn't believe he'd just shot those two men. After it happened, he felt very bad, very upset. And he was frantic. He did not intend to shoot anybody. He told me that he was going to do whatever he could to help me. And he kept apologizing for ruining my life. And I told him he didn't ruin my life. Because he doesn't deserve it. Michael would have done anything that Roy told him to do. Hearing the fact that Roy, after 23 years, finally came forward and took responsibility, I'm relieved that he finally done it, but yet at the same time I'm mad about it, because he could have saved a lot of time and a lot of hurt. And Mike maybe wouldn't be where he's at now.
I have been sober since 2012, and I have enough regrets to build a house with, probably. And so I'm trying to ease my mind and my conscience, I guess. Dealing with as much stuff as I can, like talking about Mike. That was my fault. I'm the one that talked him into that. But I'm trying to clear my conscience as much as I can and help me be honest. I don't have to hide things anymore. When I call Dad, if I need some money for something, I can tell him what it's for, and he will send it if he can. And it's just a nice feeling to be able to let all that go. And so I'm here today on my own free will to try and let this one go and take my responsibility for what I did.